Welcome, everyone. My guest today is Anne Marie Pippin, the Deputy Director of the Division of Conservatorship, Oversight, and Readiness at the FHFA, to talk about the recent TechSprint focused on generative AI. Anne Marie joined FHFA in 2017 and has 13 years of public sector experience in mortgage finance, innovation, risk management and controls, and corporate governance. Anne Marie, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for having me.
No, it's a pleasure to have you on. I got to attend the demo day at the FHFA TechSprint that you recently had, and it was so impressive. And I was so excited to have you on so we could talk more about it and get some more information out there about some of the great solutions that we saw.
Sounds great. Yeah, we were really excited to hold our second TechSprint this year, and so glad that you were able to attend and be able to sort of see some of the innovative solutions that were presented.
Yeah, to see it up close in person was really great. So let's talk about, so this is only the second TechSprint, and this time you really focused on AI. So, at what point in the year were you like, it has to be on AI?
Yeah. Well, if I could, I would love to talk, just a little bit to frame out sort of what TechSprints are to us at FHFA and just sort of frame up to sort of how last year's TechSprint and our thinking around that data and digitization really sort of led to where we wanted to focus on generative AI for the topic this year. As regulator and conservator, our job at FHFA is really to ensure that Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, the federal home loan banks fulfill their mission by, of course, operating in a safe and sound manner so that they continue to serve as reliable sources of liquidity and funding, throughout the housing finance system and throughout the economic cycle. And essential to fulfilling that mission is understanding opportunities, challenges, the evolving needs of lenders, investors, homeowners, renters in housing and housing finance. And, for many years now, FHFA has been exploring how technology can help address a number of those opportunities and challenges, including through regulatory tech sprints. So for us at FHFA, we think of tech sprints really as sort of collaboration opportunities that bring together participants across and outside the housing finance sector to develop technology-based solutions and concepts to address some of our biggest industry-wide challenges. And we do it in a competition-based format over the course of a few days. And that element of competition, the short duration, and bringing different stakeholders together, that may or may not regularly talk with one another, is really a part of the magic, if you will, of sparking new ideas and creative thinking about how technology can solve for cross-cutting industry challenges. And tech sprints are just one of many tools at FHFA that we use to better understand, how fintech can be used to address these different challenges. And, the challenges are many today: rising mortgage costs, the need for greater transparency into the process, addressing the lack of credit access and availability for underserved communities, and helping borrowers and renters be able to find housing that's affordable. So last year, we held our very first tech sprint on the challenge of understanding how data flows through the pipes in the mortgage ecosystem, and exploring the barriers to wider adoption of more digital and automated processes that could reduce costs, save time. We focused on how data, and digitization of mortgage processes could drive transparency, increase access, fairness, affordability, and sustainability in mortgage lending. And, really, we want to make sure new ideas, products, and processes are resulting in positive outcomes, especially for consumers, and that the risks of these innovations are well understood and controlled. So, in other words, our goal is to promote responsible innovation in housing finance. And, FHFA has been a leader in recognizing the impact of new technologies like AI and the impact they can have on our regulated entities and on consumers. For example, we were the first regulator to issue supervisory guidance to our regulated entities, to Fannie and Freddie, on what our expectations were for a governance framework around the development and use of AI tools and capabilities. Now, focusing on 2024 TechSprint, Gen AI, really the core themes from last year's sprint on data helped frame and advance the conversation on, what could be addressed through responsible adoption of tools like AI, because a lot of the solutions from last year's sprint really gravitated towards different AI capabilities. And it helped lay the groundwork for this year's theme, focused on sort of the hottest topic within the artificial intelligence space, generative AI, right? And so really we wanted to focus in on understanding, well, what are the tools and capabilities, most applicable to housing finance?
Yeah, I think that's such a great natural progression, right? You looked at data, and then I think Gen AI, one of the things that was so fun about this tech sprint is it really gave people imagination, but not just like pie in the sky, but like this could actually happen. They were talking about solutions that could really happen now in a way that, there's no way 5 years ago wouldn't be on there.
That's right. I mean, and, we really, so sort of the way that we framed this year's tech sprint, I just want to talk about, a little bit, because we changed a few things format wise from last year to this year. We're sort of learning and perfecting the model. So this year we asked teams to focus not just on presenting promising use cases around Gen AI usage in housing finance broadly, but also to frame out the art of the possible, along with a well thought out understanding of the associated risks and the way to lower or mitigate the risk when using Gen AI tools. We also expanded the scope of the sprint this year to focus more broadly on use cases that would be impactful, not just to single family operations, but also looking at servicing as well as multifamily use cases too. So sprint participants this year represented a pretty broad cross-section of single-family and multifamily lenders and servicers, along with, we brought in representatives from fintechs and service providers to the mortgage industry, but also looking at big tech firms such as Google, OpenAI, AWS, et cetera, to be on the teams as well. And so, our core sort of challenge or problem statement, if you will, really focused in on how might the responsible use of Gen AI promote a transparent, fair, equitable, and inclusive housing finance system while fostering sustainable home ownership and rental opportunities. So we held the event over 4 days at our headquarters right here in Washington, D.C. Participants were separated into about 12 teams, some single family focused, some multifamily focused, but each really having a diverse representation and skill set makeup to enhance the opportunity for creative thinking and problem solving. So, what do I mean by that? So we had representatives on the teams that had technical skill sets that could speak to these Gen AI tools and really how they operate, how they work from a technical perspective to, we paired those folks with representatives who could speak to the strategic and operational needs of lenders and servicers. So it effectively created an environment for creative thinking and matching of business case to technical capabilities. I also just mentioned we invited staff from FHFA, the enterprises, as well as from a few peer regulators, Jenny May, HUD, and CFPB, to assist the teams as they were doing their storming, their forming, their norming, their creative problem solving. And those folks served as subject matter experts. So not just to any one team, but to all of the teams. And I think that was really impactful as the teams, were able to bounce ideas off of the SMEs and troubleshoot their understanding of the current regulatory landscape, which I think led into sort of the quality of the different use cases that we got this year. I also just mentioned that big problem statement that I talked about, that's broad. How can Gen AI be used to do all of these things in housing finance that we want it to be able to do for good? So what we did was we sort of separated out for the teams. Well, we want you to think about this in terms of 4 key areas of focus where we think Gen AI, has an opportunity. Consumer experience, assessing creditworthiness, operations, so the operations of lenders and servicers, as well as within the risk and compliance process itself. And the use cases we got were pretty compelling.
They really are. So there were 12 teams, 12 use cases presented at the demo day that I went to, and that people can watch, I believe. And then you guys recognized 4 winners based on most promising use case of Gen AI for user experience, for assessing creditworthiness, right? Matching those goals, for operations, and for risk and compliance. And out of those 4, you had 3 of them were really about multifamily. And then one was on single family servicing. So I thought that was really interesting. And also, I just wanted to say, I talked to several participants, and the fact that you had those SME experts, from the different regulatory bodies and from you, I think what a shot in the arm, like what it got it so further along easier, right? Because you're not coming up with stuff that then at the end it's like, well, you can't do that, right? So I think it was so smart, and it really showed in the demos that they did that it was a very considered approach in every single one of them.
Exactly. I think that really sort of like shined through this year because we had a sort of a depth and breadth of subject matter experts supporting all of the teams, sort of beyond the approach that we did last year. So I think it really resulted in sort of like a very creative thought, but thought that could be sort of ready implemented, because there is already this consideration of the existing regulatory landscape and the guardrails and the barriers and the risks and the controls. So, we were just really excited to sort of see the quality of all of the different use cases that the teams presented. But of course, 4 got recognition from the judges. It was very interesting to see that 3 out of the 4 that got recognition were in the multifamily space. Looking at these 4 sort of categories and areas that we had the teams really sort of focus on, with consumer experience, just to sort of play that out a little bit. What do we mean by that? So here we're really talking about how Gen AI can be used to further educate and empower prospective home buyers, and doing things like evaluating, comparing, and going through the process of obtaining a mortgage loan, whether it's a first-time home buyer or a more experienced home buyer, as well as in sustaining their home ownership over time. And in the multifamily side of that, also is there an opportunity for generative AI to empower prospective renters and tenants in obtaining and sustaining rental housing? So the team that won in this particular category had a really interesting use case that focused on and would offer what they framed as an Uber-like AI platform that matches renters with property managers. So that was an interesting framing. For the renter, the application would do things like aim to provide a standard rental application and screening process by sort of automating the process and doing upfront background checks, pulling credit reports, verifying asset and income information to generate a sort of a tenant readiness rating that could then be used to affect the list of available properties in the area that meet their criteria. So a prospective tenant, is going in sort of more empowered and knowledgeable about what sorts of properties are available in their area that they would automatically go ahead and qualify for.
I think that's really an interesting one, because you don't think about the power dynamic of like you going in and it's like you hope they accept you and your application's okay. And I mean, there's no negotiation at that part. You're like, you're like, I hope I get in. Whereas if you go like, I know I'm already meeting their standards, I can go in there. And then it's just a different feeling on the part of the renter, I would think.
That's exactly right. And, there's a huge benefit too on the other side of the house for, property managers and owners to be able to have sort of more of a pre-qualified pool of applicants coming to visit and see their properties that they know are already going to be sort of pre-qualified to be prospective renters at the property. So there's sort of a good matching of business case from the consumer standpoint, as well as the property owner and property manager standpoint as well.
Well, and one of the other winners, the solution that was recognized for most promising use of Gen AI for operations was a fraud detection tool for multifamily operations. So,
That's right.
because and one of the things that the panel of judges said about the first winner that we just talked about was like, the potential for fraud here is very large. And then, but we
Yeah.
had this other whole service that was talking about how Gen AI can really help combat fraud. Some of that fraud is Gen AI originated, right? Created,
Yeah.
and then, but it can also, on the other hand, be a tool to catch it.
That's right. I mean, there are two sides of the coin with the use of really any type of technology, but especially AI. And we're talking about generative AI. It can be used for purposes such as more issues in the fraud space. It can create that. But for good, it can do so many good things around enhancing the capability to detect fraud up front. And so this particular use case that the team got recognized for in the operations area of focus was really focused on, could Gen AI help multifamily lenders detect potential fraud from documents submitted by borrowers seeking commercial financing? So it really had that as a focus. And, the tool was pitched as having the potential to augment more manual human-based processes to improve speed and accuracy around fraud detection. And there were sort of some of these key features around document verifications. So, verifying borrower documents against known formats, databases, exclusion lists. That's actually a lot harder than you think. There are lots of different formats to these types of documents, lots of databases and exclusion lists to check. So that was pretty compelling, along with capabilities around anomaly detection and the ability to sort of summarize content and make recommendations. And that's part of the Gen AI capability that was really interesting to see.
So, the last multifamily solution that got recognized, which really, to me, was the one that sort of really would not have been possible without Gen AI, is that it was called ADA Comply, and it was to use image assessment to ensure multifamily units are ADA compliant. And it would take, you'd take a picture of whatever the bathroom, for instance, and the Gen AI would identify what part of it wasn't compliant, and then generate a picture with something that was compliant, like a before and after, and would also generate how much it would cost to make that change, which was just, I was just blown away by that.
I was too. We actually, so in the risk and compliance area of focus, we had 4 teams focus on this area. So that was one of the sort of more popular areas, if you will, for the teams to gravitate towards. And this particular use case was certainly, I think, very compelling. It's shining the light on an issue, too, that I can say I was not as aware of, coming into the TechSprint. And so, I think it was really compelling to really see how Gen AI's capabilities of being able to use a large language model to ingest images, as well as other types of data, could then be used to extrapolate to a particular property and show where non-compliance could be happening, and then how to fix it, right?
I mean, just thinking about the speed to doing that in this way versus like, okay, you have to go have someone go in, take pictures. You have to have a human look at that. I mean, it was stunning to me. I could see why it won. And then the one that was for single family, it was based on servicing, and I really loved it. It really looked at getting to distressed borrowers much faster than we can currently do, and starting at 32 days late to come up with a plan, communicate the plan, start working on the plan. And really, I mean, I just thought it was a great kind of a continuation of what we saw in the pandemic period, where servicers found these ways to do it, and now here's Gen AI helping them even more.
That's right. I think, we were really expecting in the assessing creditworthiness area of focus to see use cases that focused in on sort of the origination process. And, we did see some really interesting use cases around down payment assistance and ways to conduct sort of self-guided appraisals
Yes.
But the use case that won really, as you said, dove into looking at the servicing side, right? And when homeowners, may face financial issues and trouble, and sort of how that process goes. And it was really interesting to see sort of how the model that the team was framing up would provide early identification and intervention steps to empower a distressed borrower who in that state is stressed and just probably not thinking about all the different options available to them, at like 32 days late, which is a key sort of time period when you're talking about delinquency status. How to think about how to keep these folks in their home. What are the steps that they need to do sort of from an early intervention standpoint? And what are the steps that a servicer needs to do to conduct outreach? So this model, could flag and review the loan, create an intervention plan, contact the borrower to review options, and really this helps the entire system by helping to maintain borrower creditworthiness, by potentially avoiding going into sort of that default cycle. So it was really, really cool.
Yeah, and it did check several of those boxes, as you just said. I did want to talk about, so the judges, there was a panel that they'd presented to, and they were like, well, here's some of the things. And one thing that struck me was how often, even in the best AI use cases, there's still that human in the loop that was necessary, at least from the judge's perspective, and then also from the team's perspective. What was your takeaway there?
Not surprised, and just sort of very, very glad to hear that too from most all of the teams around the need to have the control of keeping the human in the loop. At this point in the state of using AI and the capabilities of AI and Gen AI, we're not to a point where you would want to put these types of models on autopilot and not be able to check in. As I mentioned in the beginning, we are very keen at FHFA on fostering responsible adoption of innovation. And this is absolutely a critical step and control that we see around these models that needs to be, in the process. There were also some interesting, sort of other types of controls that were mentioned to mitigate risks around things like hallucinations. Right. So with Gen AI models, this is sort of a unique risk that happens when you're using a large language model that might be taking in data and information from a wide swath. So think about like internet scale large language models like ChatGPT. Could those be used within the housing finance context? Absolutely. But they may need to be augmented by these RAG models that you keep hearing about, or at least I keep hearing about. And that stands for retrieval augmented generation. And so what RAG models do is help sort of tailor and translate the large language models and the large data sets that they feed off of into really queuing into more specific data sets, let's say within the housing finance context, so that it improves the accuracy of the answer. So I thought that was really interesting too, that a number of teams pointed to RAG models and the need to incorporate that into the process.
Well, I am not a technologist, and I was taking furious notes, and I was like, what is RAG? What is this? And so I had to go home and try to figure out what that was. One of the other things that I learned a lot about at the TechSprint was the synthetic data and the idea of not just anonymizing data, but really creating a data set that is it mirrors all the characteristics of this without any of the personally identifying information in a way that's not just anonymizing. I didn't even know that was a thing.
Yeah. Sort of this idea of creating synthetic data sets to be used for different purposes, I think is really sort of interesting, to be thinking about. I think one of the teams sort of framed it as creating a digital twin of mortgage data, let's say that like the enterprise is housed today, to be able to then improve things like quality control processes more upfront before they're even delivered and sold to the GSEs. So that definitely got me thinking quite a bit too about how to think about the production of these synthetic data sets and then how they can be used to improve these types of processes.
So what is this TechSprint? I can see what it does for the industry and just really like innovation. What is this? What's the benefit for FHFA?
Yeah, well, really, it creates a great learning environment for us as regulator and conservator, over the enterprises, over the Federal Home Loan Bank, so that we, one, keep up with the state of what's going on, within the greater housing finance system and industry, how lenders and servicers of various sizes are utilizing these types of tools and techniques, because that really impacts the GSEs and the Federal Home Loan Banks, because these entities are critical counterparties and they're also critical vendors. So you think about third party and fourth party risks that can be sort of manifesting in the system. We really need to be able to understand, well, what are the core uses of things like Gen AI? And go in eyes wide open with an understanding of what are the risks and what are the various controls, that need to be in place to mitigate that risk, both from the standpoint of thinking about it, our regulated entities, as well as broader usage throughout the industry. So at FHFA, we established an Office of Financial Technology, just a couple of years ago, to really support our agency efforts to understand all of the different tech-driven developments going on within housing finance, within the sector, and to facilitate the development of responsible innovation within our regulated entities. And so the TechSprint and the TechSprint model is one of the tools that we've gravitated towards to use as an ideation, a learning, and collaboration type mechanism. We also have a number of things going on sort of internal to the agency as well, around thinking about how we as an agency, a government entity, can utilize AI tools as well within our own operations. We just recently appointed our first ever chief AI officer for the agency. That's Tracy Steffen, who also leads our FinTech office. And so I think, it's really exciting to think that we're sort of on the precipice of thinking about these tools and capabilities in the industry, as well as within our own operations as an agency.
Well, Anne Marie, thank you so much for being on. Clearly, the TechSprint was a huge success. We're going to continue to report on it, and I'm linking to the story that I did on all of the 12 demos here, as well as to your page about that. But thanks for being on and just sharing your, your vision for this. I really appreciate it.
Well, thanks so much, Sarah. I really appreciate you and HousingWire having me on. Thanks so much.